Welcome. I am Melesias. Today, we are stepping into a world that gleams. A world of clean white surfaces, of genetically engineered perfection, of endless pleasure and effortless consumption. There is no war here. No poverty. No loneliness. Everyone is happy. Everyone belongs. And no one is free. We are opening Brave New World, the masterpiece of dystopian fiction by Aldous Huxley, a book that is, in many ways, far more terrifying than the one it is often compared to, George Orwell's 1984. The man who wrote this book was, by all accounts, an aristocrat of the mind. Aldous Huxley was born in 1894 into one of England's most distinguished intellectual families. His grandfather was the great biologist Thomas Henry Huxley, known as Darwin's bulldog. His brother, Julian, would become a famous evolutionary biologist. The young Aldous seemed destined for a career in science himself. But then, tragedy struck. As a teenager, he contracted a devastating eye disease that left him nearly blind for several years. His eyesight never fully recovered. He was forced to abandon the microscope and the laboratory. He turned, instead, to the written word. From this unique vantage point, a man steeped in the biological sciences but now devoted entirely to art and literature, he began to see the future with terrifying clarity. It was 1931. The world was changing. Henry Ford's assembly lines were revolutionizing industry, turning men into efficient, replaceable parts of a vast machine. Advertising was becoming a science, learning to manipulate desires. Dictatorships were rising, but Huxley saw that the old forms of tyranny, the fear and the violence, were crude. They were a boot stamping on a human face. They bred resentment. They bred rebellion. What if, he thought, there was a better way? What if you could create a society so comfortable, so endlessly pleasurable, that no one would ever want to rebel? What if the prison walls were invisible, and the inmates fell in love with their chains? This was the dark, brilliant seed of his novel. A dystopia not of pain, but of pleasure. A world engineered from birth for total, unthinking happiness. The old gods have been replaced. The new era is not dated from the birth of Christ, but from the birth of the automobile. The year is not 1931. It is the year of our Ford, 632. And the motto of this new world, the single, hypnotic mantra whispered into the ears of every citizen from the moment they are decanted, is the most chilling promise ever made: community, identity, stability. Let us step inside. Part 1, The Hatchery and Conditioning Center. We begin our journey not in a garden, not in a home, but in a factory. The Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Center. It is a low, grey, and vast building of only 34 floors. Over the main entrance, the words of the World State's motto are emblazoned. Inside, it is not a place of birth. It is a place of manufacture. Life is no longer a miracle, but a product, a commodity, something to be produced on a massive scale, measured, tested, and stamped with a quality grade. And the director of this extraordinary factory, a man with a proud smile and a resonant voice, is eager to show us around. His name is the Director of Hatcheries and Conditioning. He is our guide into this brave new world. And the first stop on his tour is the fertilizing room. Here, in a symphony of sterilized glass and gleaming metal, the human reproductive process has been completely and utterly industrialized. Ovaries are surgically removed from female workers, carefully sliced, and placed in a warm, nutrient-rich solution. This solution tricks them into producing hundreds of ripe eggs. Spermatozoa, similarly harvested and stored, are introduced. The miracle of fertilization happens not in a body, but in a petri dish, watched over by technicians in white coats. The fertilized eggs are then placed into incubators, where they will begin their slow, mechanical gestation. But this is not just about efficiency. It is about control. For the most significant moment in the entire process is about to occur. The director leads us down a sterile corridor and into a room that smells faintly of alcohol and creosote. This is the bottling room. And here, the destiny of every single human being is determined, not by nature, but by design. The director explains, with immense satisfaction, the secret of the world state's success, the Bokanovsky process. A single fertilized egg, under normal circumstances, produces one human being. But by subjecting it to a series of carefully timed shocks, radiation, chemical baths, the egg can be forced to divide not into 2, 4, or 8, but into as many as 96 identical buds. 96 identical twins from a single egg. This is the instrument of social stability. Imagine, the director proclaims, a factory where the assembly line workers are not a random collection of individuals with their own quirks and discontents. They are a single, unified, identical batch. They think alike, work alike, and are perfectly, blissfully happy in their station. They are a swarm. And a swarm does not rebel. But the production of bodies is only half the story. The real masterpiece of the world state is the conditioning of minds. From the very moment an embryo begins to develop, its future is being shaped. The bottles in which the embryos grow are not silent. They are equipped with tiny speakers that play, day and night, a constant, whispered stream of information. This is hypnopedia, sleep teaching. And it is the most powerful tool of social control ever invented. The director leads the group to the next hall, the Neo-Pavlovian conditioning rooms. Here, we see the process in action. A group of 8-month-old Delta infants, dressed in identical khaki uniforms, are brought into a room filled with brightly colored books and beautiful, artificial roses. As the babies crawl towards the books and flowers with squeals of delight, a lever is pulled. A hideous, deafening alarm bell shrieks. Electric shocks pulse through the floor. The infants scream in terror. This is repeated, again and again, until the very sight of a rose or a book produces an uncontrollable, instinctive horror. The lesson is simple and absolute: deltas must hate flowers. Deltas must hate books. Nature is free, and books might make them think. And thinking is the enemy of happiness. And so, the human being is built, layer by layer. The body is manufactured. The mind is programmed. And to ensure that no crack ever appears in this perfect edifice of control, a final, universal tool is provided. It is the ultimate drug, the cure for any sadness, any anxiety, any flicker of doubt. It is called soma. Half a gram for a half holiday, a gram for a weekend, 2 grams for a trip to the gorgeous East. Soma has none of the drawbacks of the old, imperfect intoxicants. It leaves no hangover. It creates no addiction. It simply wraps you in a warm, benevolent blanket of pure, unadulterated happiness. You swallow a tablet, and all is well. You take a holiday from reality, whenever you choose. And in the world state, you are expected to choose it often. For a happy citizen, as the controller will later explain, is a citizen who never asks questions. Part 2, Lenina and Bernard, the Reluctant Rebels. In the bright, sterile, and endlessly pleasurable world of the world state, 2 individuals are, for very different reasons, beginning to feel like strangers in their own home. One is a woman who is perfectly conditioned, yet feels a faint, inexplicable pull towards something real. The other is a man who has been physically and socially stunted, an outcast among the beautiful and the happy. Their names are Lenina Crown and Bernard Marx. And their meeting will set in motion a chain of events that will expose the fragile, rotten core of this brave new world. Lenina Crown is a beta plus, a nurse at the hatchery, and by all objective standards, she is a perfect citizen. She is beautiful, with the pneumatic, desirable curves so prized by her society. She is popular, promiscuous, and always ready for a game of obstacle golf or a trip to the Feelies. Her motto, like everyone else's, is everyone belongs to everyone else. To be exclusive, to form a deep, lasting attachment to one person, is the greatest sin. But Lenina, despite herself, is beginning to feel something strange. She has been seeing Henry Foster, a perfectly acceptable alpha, for 4 months now. And she feels a peculiar, unsettling, and deeply antisocial desire to be with him exclusively. It is a faint whisper of something old, something the world state has spent centuries trying to eradicate. It is the first, quiet stirring of romantic love. Bernard Marx is an alpha plus, the highest caste, a man who should be at the very pinnacle of society. But Bernard is small, thin, and physically awkward. A terrible rumor, whispered behind his back, is that a mistake was made during his decanting. Some believe too much alcohol was poured into his blood surrogate, stunting his growth. He looks, and feels, like a member of a lower caste. This physical inferiority has made him an outsider, a loner, a man deeply resentful of the world that has rejected him. He does not enjoy the feelies. He does not play obstacle golf. He does not take soma. He craves solitude. He longs for something more than the mindless, communal pleasures on offer. He is a nonconformist, not out of principle, but out of a deep, aching inability to fit in. And his difference has been noticed. The director of the hatchery, his boss, has already issued him a grave and ominous warning. This is the second time you've been late, and this is the second time you've behaved in an unorthodox manner, the director tells him, his voice cold. You must learn to conform. It is Bernard who, in a desperate bid for acceptance and a desire to share his secret thoughts with someone, invites Lenina to accompany him on a trip. He has secured a permit for a vacation. A trip not to the civilized pleasure resorts of the world state, but to a place of ancient danger and savage mystery, a savage reservation in New Mexico. Lenina, intrigued and still nursing her strange, new, private feelings, accepts. Their helicopter ride is smooth and silent. The gleaming white towers of London give way to green fields, then to mountains, and finally, to a vast, arid, and wild landscape. As they descend, they see a high, electrified fence, stretching across the desert for as far as the eye can see. It is a barrier against the past. Against a world where sickness, old age, poverty, and religion still exist. A world that the world state has not touched. A world, Bernard explains to a bewildered Lenina, where people still give birth, where they age and die, where they worship God. Lenina shudders. It sounds monstrous. Inside the reservation, they are shocked by what they see. The dirt, the decay, the poverty, the old woman with wrinkles, the man with a missing tooth. It is a living museum of horrors. And then, they witness a ritual. A young, blonde, and strikingly beautiful woman named Linda is being whipped by the tribal elders. She is an outcast here, too. Bernard learns her story. Linda, he discovers, is a woman who, many years ago, was on a trip to this very reservation with a man, the director of hatcheries himself. She fell, hit her head, and was left behind. She was pregnant. She gave birth. And the child, a boy, is now a young man. His name is John. He is the son of the director. He is a savage, raised on the myths of his mother's lost world and the complete works of William Shakespeare. John is fascinated by Bernard and Lenina. They are from the world his mother has told him about all his life, a world of endless beauty, comfort, and wonder. His head is full of Shakespeare's words, of noble heroes and tragic lovers. He sees in Lenina the embodiment of Juliet, of Miranda, of every beautiful, unattainable princess. And Bernard sees in John an opportunity. A ticket to the fame and acceptance he has always craved. He will bring the savage back to London. And the world will be changed forever. Part 3, The Savage in the New World. The news spread through London like an electric shock. A savage had been brought from the reservation. An authentic, living, breathing savage, the son of a woman who had been lost decades ago. The director of hatcheries, the man who was about to publicly humiliate and exile Bernard Marx for his unorthodox behavior, found himself confronted in the middle of the fertilizing room by a ghost from his own past. A young man, wild-eyed and dressed in rags, fell to his knees before him and cried out, "My father." The director, his perfect, controlled world shattering in an instant, fled the room in utter humiliation. Bernard was saved. And John, the savage, became an instant, global celebrity. Bernard basked in the reflected glory of his discovery. For the first time in his life, he was the center of attention. He was invited to all the best parties. Women who had previously ignored him now flocked to him, desperate to hear the story of the savage. His ego, starved for so long, swelled to monstrous proportions. But the savage himself, John, was utterly bewildered. He was given a luxury apartment filled with gadgets he did not understand. He was fed foods he could not name. He was taken to the feelies, movies that stimulated all the senses, and walked out in disgust. This was not the world his mother had described. She had spoken of beauty and freedom. He saw only emptiness and a terrifying absence of feeling. And then, there was Lenina. John loved her, not with the shallow, fleeting lust of the world state, but with the fierce, consuming, tragic passion of Romeo for Juliet. He worshipped her. He wanted to suffer for her, to write sonnets for her, to earn her love through great and noble deeds. But Lenina, perfectly conditioned, could not understand any of this. For her, love meant a night of shared pleasure, nothing more. She went to his apartment, stripped off her clothes, and offered herself to him. John was horrified. "Get away from me, you whore," he screamed, lashing out with Shakespearean fury. She fled, sobbing. The two worlds had collided, and neither could comprehend the other. The turning point came when John learned that his mother, Linda, who had been taken to a hospital upon their arrival, was dying. Linda, the woman from the civilized world who had been trapped in the reservation, had been pumped full of soma by the doctors. She was drifting away in a blissful, narcotic haze. John rushed to her bedside, but she no longer recognized him. She smiled vacantly, her mind lost in a cloud of artificial happiness. When she finally died, John's grief was absolute and terrifying. He erupted in a frenzy of rage against the heartless, drugged, and shallow world that had stolen his mother's soul long before her body had stopped breathing. He went to a hospital for the dying and, in a wild, desperate act of rebellion, threw the boxes of soma tablets out the window, screaming at the assembled, identical deltas to be free. "Don't you want to be free and men?" he shouted at them. But they could not understand him. They had never known anything else. They rioted, not for freedom, but because their drug supply was threatened. The police arrived, subdued him with soma vapor, and took him away. The final act of John's tragedy was his meeting with the man who controlled this entire world. Mustafa Mond, the resident world controller for Western Europe. He was not a fanatic or a thug. He was a brilliant, calm, and deeply intelligent man. He had read Shakespeare. He had read the Bible. He understood John's passion, his longing for God, for art, for suffering. And he explained, with a terrifying, paternal logic, why all of those things had been sacrificed. "We have chosen happiness," he said. "Universal happiness keeps the wheels steadily turning. Truth and beauty cannot do that." The world had been given a choice between high art and a stable, happy populace. They had chosen happiness. God was incompatible with the machine age, so God had been removed. Tragedy, passion, heroism, these were diseases of the old world. The new world had soma. It had endless pleasure. And it had peace. John, his arguments demolished not by force but by reason, was left with nothing but the ruins of his own impossible dreams. Part 4, The Final Dialogue and the Fall. John, the savage, was broken. The meeting with Mustafa Mond, the world controller, had not been a victory. It had been a quiet, devastating surrender. Everything John believed in God, art, love, suffering, heroism had been calmly, logically, and lovingly explained away by a man who was not a monster, but a guardian of a happy, stable, and utterly soulless world. Mond had offered him a choice: stay in the civilized world, with all its comforts and its soma, or go. John chose to go. He chose to exile himself from a society that could not understand him, a society that had sacrificed truth for happiness, depth for stability, and passion for peace. He fled London, leaving behind the gleaming towers and the identical, smiling faces, and retreated to a place of total, solitary isolation, an abandoned lighthouse on a desolate hill in the English countryside. It was here, in this forgotten place, that John hoped to purify himself. To cleanse his soul of the filth and the emptiness of the world state. To escape the haunting memory of Lenina, whose beauty and whose shallow, unthinking sexuality tormented him. He had wanted to love her with the fierce, noble, self-sacrificing love of a Shakespearean hero. But she could not receive that love. She could only offer her body, without her soul. And in a moment of rage and despair, he had rejected her, violently. The guilt of that moment consumed him. He had failed. He had failed his mother. He had failed his ideals. He had failed to be the hero of his own story. And so, he turned to the only thing he had left, penance. He took a whip, a simple, cruel instrument of leather, and he began to flagellate himself, lashing his own back until the blood ran, trying to drive out the demon of desire, the demon of the self. He would purify himself through pain, since he could not find purity in the world. But the world would not leave him alone. The journalists found him. A reporter, eager for a sensational story, had tracked the famous Savage to his hiding place. The story was broadcast across the globe. And soon, the helicopters began to arrive. A swarm of curious, bored, pleasure-seeking citizens descended upon the lighthouse. They wanted to see the savage. They wanted to watch his strange, primitive rituals. They came in their hundreds, circling the lighthouse like vultures, their cameras whirring, their faces lit with a vacant, voyeuristic excitement. John, trapped and tormented, became a spectacle once more. The crowd below began to chant, "We want the whip. We want the whip." They did not understand his suffering. They simply wanted to see the show. And then, someone in the crowd noticed a familiar, pneumatic figure. It was Lenina, who had come, confused and still drawn to him, to see what was happening. For a moment, John saw her. The object of his torment. And the crowd, sensing the drama, began to chant a grotesque, hypnotic rhythm, "Orgy porgy. Orgy porgy." They began a mass, frenzied dance, a public ritual of soma-fueled, mindless sexuality, right there, beneath his window. The sight of it, of Lenina being pulled into the writhing mass, was the final, unbearable blow. The next morning, the helicopters were gone. The crowd had dispersed, their thirst for spectacle temporarily satisfied. An eerie, heavy silence hung over the lighthouse. Inside, at the top of the tower, a terrible discovery was made. The feet of John, the savage, were found dangling in the air. He had hanged himself. His body was slowly turning, back and forth, a silent, tragic pendulum. He had escaped the brave new world the only way he could. The man who had dreamed of noble love, of a God who suffered, of a life with meaning, had been crushed by a world that had no use for any of those things. He was the last man, and he had died for a truth that no one else could even perceive. Epilogue: Is this still a dystopia? And so, the story of the savage comes to an end. He came from a world of dirt, disease, and gods, into a world of gleaming perfection. And he could not survive it. Not because the new world was cruel, but because it was kind. Not because it punished, but because it offered nothing worth suffering for. Aldous Huxley wrote this book as a warning. And the terrifying thing, as we look around our own world, is how much of it has come true. Our pills are not called soma, but they are ubiquitous. Our feelies are not called feelies, but we call them virtual reality, endless scrolling, the bombardment of our senses. Our obsession with youth, with comfort, with distraction. Huxley saw it all. He saw a world where we would be drowned in pleasure, not crushed by tyranny. And the most chilling question the book leaves us with is this: if we were offered a life of perfect, untroubled happiness, a life without art, without love, without God, without meaning, would we have the strength to say no? Or would we, like the citizens of the world state, simply reach for the soma and smile? I am Melesias. This has been the story of Brave New World, as I have understood it. Thank you for listening. If this dark vision of the future has moved you, please subscribe. And the next time you reach for a pill, a drink, or a screen to escape your own thoughts, remember the savage. Remember that your unhappiness is not a disease. It is the last, flickering proof of your humanity.